Well, I'm joined by Treasury Minister Alf Cannan as the news has been released today that the government is looking to buy the steam packet. Have I got that exactly right? You want to buy the boats, you want to buy the routes, you want to buy the assets, the whole thing off the Portuguese and other banks, is that right?
That's correct, Paul. We will be going to Tynwald a week on Tuesday with a motion to support the government's view that the steam packet should be acquired for £124.3 million.
Where'd you get that number from?
Well, there's been extensive due diligence around this. As you might imagine, this process has been going on now for a number of months. But the critical point here, Paul, is that the Isle of Man, its residents, its businesses, has been exposed to a very uncertain and potentially unstable situation when it comes to the ownership of the steam packet. And along with that, there's been, I would describe, a more than generous user agreement that has enabled the steam packet to absolutely maximise its profits, and I would suggest at points with detriment to the island. So the Council of Ministers has supported the view that it is in the island's interest that the government now take a controlling stake in the steam packet by acquiring 100% of the shares, and we will ultimately then set out a plan to restructure that in such a way so that the business is effectively run as an arm's length organisation.
Okay, 124 million, where do you get the number from? Have you been obviously in negotiation, they've put that on the table, or have you been going back? Have they said 200, you've gone 100, is it all that been going on behind the scenes all this time?
Well, the current owners are running a very profitable shipping business and are taking out significant chunks of the profit to finance the debt that they have laden that company with. And what you have to remember with the Isle of Man Steam Packet Company is that currently city banks, investment bankers and hedge funds see the Isle of Man Steam Packet Company as a very healthy commodity, a monopoly business producing very reasonable and significant healthy profits. And even if we'd moved to a stage where we had moved to a new user agreement with the Steam Packet Company, we would have thrown ourselves back into a situation where the ownership of the business would have been immediately up for grabs again. And who knows what would have happened as we went further forward into the future. I think that it's right now that the government recognises the importance, a strategic importance of the Isle of Man Steam Packet Company and moves in now to restore stability to the ownership structure and restore stability and focus in terms of the user agreement, the performance of the company, so that it is operating in the best economic interests of the Isle of Man and its residents.
Surely you've made it the cash cow it is. I mean, it's not you personally, I mean the government, by giving the user agreement, which gives it the monopoly basically, which makes it ka-ching. Would not another idea be to look at getting a second operator in there with your £124 million, offering it as a carrot to get somebody else in?
Well, there's no, first and foremost, there's not really room, as we recognise, for two shipping operators to effectively compete on the route. The second point is that the Steam Packet were entitled to extend the user agreement till 2026. We were facing 7 years of, I think, high prices, a maximisation of that user agreement. And the banks, the city banks and the investors currently involved with the Steam Packet would have simply sought to recoup as much value out of the company as possible, without cause to really consider the impact that that might have on the broader economy. So these are the reasons why we feel it's appropriate now to take the position that we're taking and to ask Tynwald to support the offer of £124 million for the business. And just to pick up on your point, you said, where do we get that money from? Well, if you're looking at a business that's making and was scheduled to make profits between 12 and 15 million pounds for the next 7 years, you can clearly see that we're talking of a fairly significant sum that will be required by those who are involved with owning the business now in terms of recompense for any transfer of the shares.
To make that sort of money, the costs of going from A to B are what they are, and you're saying they're probably too much, aren't they? Because they're got the monopoly, you're not going to come around in on day one and slash the prices to get to the Isle of Man then, are you? Because you still want that sort of return to get your money back in, don't you?
Well, no, of course, what we do want is the company to be run on a commercial arm's length basis. And it's absolutely vital that the business remains profitable and is run efficiently and effectively. That's why we will be looking to restructure the financing of the £124 million to ensure that the business is put as far away from government as possible, yet that we still have some strategic control over it, and that will either be with some form of preferential shares or some majority shareholding. And what we're asking Tynwald is to look at this in three phases. Phase one being the actual acquisition of the business at £124.3 million. Phase two will be the refinancing, so we will restructure the £124 million in the government accounts to reflect a £76 million loan to the steam packet, £48 million of equity shareholding in the steam packet. The steam packet will be asked to refinance the £76 million through either a public bond or through some form of commercial lending. In other words, government will get its £76 million back. And we will also then look for other investors and partners to come in to the business to help it run efficiently and effectively. And in doing so, I would expect that we will get some recourse back to the £48 million worth of investment that we've put in to the shareholding.
Is this a done deal, and not as far as you've got to get through Tynwald, is it a done deal from the steam packet's end? I mean, what stops Stena or somebody else coming in and making a bigger bid for the business?
Well, we will own both the link spans, first and foremost.
So you're saying if we don't get it?
If we purchase. The other point is that the makeup of the route, the makeup of Douglas Harbour is fairly unique, and we've already recognised some weaknesses with Douglas Harbour in the latest report that's come out, but we also recognise its strengths. Now, the steam packet has the ships that are capable of easy entry and exit into and out of Douglas Harbour, and once we own both the link spans, then for another operator to come in, it's virtually impossible.
I mean, the money you're spending on Douglas, also Liverpool's got to be done. Is this all part, is it going on behind the scenes that you just want to own the whole thing? Is it ever going to go to a tender as such and other interested ship operators looking at it?
Well, we were facing, as I've said before, up to 7 years of real uncertainty around this. In that, if you recall, government did run an expressions of interest exercise a couple of years ago. They got very, very little in return from that. And that's hardly surprising, given that the steam packet effectively had the control over the route until 2026. As I said, the uncertainty that we were facing in that respect made it sensible for government to step in now at this point. And also, the way the route and the company are being treated by city banks and by investment managers and by hedge funds really is unacceptable. And yes, whilst arguably government has been the master of its own downfall in terms of the way the user agreement has been structured and framed, what we don't want to do is to allow that situation to continue. We think that it is better that the government has now ultimately has a strategic control, a strategic say in the steam packet. And as I say, we will then structure the user agreement in such a way so that it is more beneficial to the economy and more beneficial to the residents of the island.
This is nationalisation. It's almost a dirty word in the UK as such. Everything was denationalised. I mean, do you really, in your heart, thinks government can, and I know you're going to say it's put third party, but at the end of the day, the government will be running a shipping service. In whatever form you take it, you own it.
No, the government will have strategic control on the shipping service in terms of, ultimately, if the restructuring goes through successfully, holding preferential shares or majority shareholding. As I've said, it is our firm intention that this operates at arm's length. It will operate with an independent board of directors.
So a crown goes and put in there?
It will be governed much more efficiently and effectively, and the key document in all this is the user agreement. Mm-hmm. But clearly, as the preferential shareholder, the government will have a strong voice in terms of any potential decisions or strategic decisions that are being made by the board.
If it goes through on Tuesday, and that's obviously maybe a big if, you've still got to convince, I just imagine, quite a few people to spend that sort of money, how fast a process would this be for the takeover to happen?
Well, first and foremost, yes, absolutely, this is all subject to Tynwald approval, and we do have to go, the next week there will be a number of briefings for Tynwald members, so they get a they get a full insight.
Coleman's on board, obviously.
The Council of Ministers has strongly supported this move.
Any tensions there?
Since we commenced the negotiations back in December, and prior to that, obviously, we're doing quite a bit of due diligence in terms of certifying the numbers.
Unanimous?
Absolutely, the Council of Ministers are 100% behind this. But let me just be clear again. I think the initial outlay of £124.3 million will come from our cash reserves. But it is our intention to refinance this and restructure this in such a way so that the bulk of the money is back into the government account within the next 12 months. So we are taking a firm view that this should be done ultimately with the minimum risk to the taxpayer, and ultimately maintaining the view now that a monopoly ferry service providing a strategic lifeline, as the steam packet does, should have some form of national control, and this is how we're now going to do it.
You're running a zoo, you're running a cinema, you're running a radio station, horse trams. Here we go. You know, the government is going to be running everything.
Well, that's not necessarily true, Paul, but the point is we need to take strong measures where we think there is a need to do so, and it is in the national interest to do so. And I really don't think the steam packet and the ferry service is on the same basis as horse trams and the wildlife park. But I think the critical thing is that in the last 2.5 years, we have taken some very proactive steps where we feel it necessary in the national interest to do so, including writing off £95 million worth of MUA debt, because we absolutely clearly felt that the utility bill scenario was fast becoming out of control and it needed to be sorted out, including significant raises in the tax allowances, because we felt that we needed to start addressing some imbalances in the economy. And now we feel that the strategic sea service needs intervention so that we have a secure and stable service for the future.
Is this your idea?
This is not my idea. This is an idea that has had its seeds of germination in the discussions around the future for the steam packet company. And the Council of Ministers have formulated and supported this idea and the structure behind it. And that is what I, as the Treasury Minister, are now bringing to Tynwald.
Who gets a pat on the back if it goes well, and who wants to not know about it when it goes wrong?
Well, clearly with all these sorts of deals, there are risks. These are commercial transactions, and we have to be prepared to ensure that we have minimised all the future risks around this as much as can be possible. Now, we've set out to do that. We've set out a clear plan for refinancing, and we've set out a clear plan, business plan for the steam packet to go about its normal business in an efficient and effective way. And in the medium to long term, we as an island will see the benefits of that.
What about the stock itself? I mean, the boats are getting to the point where I believe they need to be looked at and replaced. Will that be another cash call from government on top of that money to do that?
No, we have worked this deal in such a way. We have made allowances for the new boats. They are built into the cash flow projections for the Isle of Man Steam Packet Company. We are going to support that by not drawing down any significant dividends in the next few years.
So that money won't go back into your coffers, then you just said
just hear me out. Yeah. So we will allow the steam packet to build up a good cash base to be able to finance a significant amount of money and finance required for those boats. And if there is necessary, there may be a small amount of lending required, but that will be a matter for the steam packet company and its board.
The use agreement goes then, because the reason for the use agreement is to control the company. You will be the company, so you won't need to say we must have a fast craft, we must have so many sailings a day, because you'll just tell
It's absolutely vital that we allow this company to run and function at arm's length, and a user agreement will be critical to that. Clearly within the user agreement we have elements including the ability to raise prices, how much they could be raised by, also route requirements and how these routes are to be serviced. This remains a vital document. It's specifically if we're going to run this at arm's length and ensure that the directors have some independence in terms of making decisions on a day-to-day basis for the efficient running of the business, that user agreement absolutely reflects the current circumstances of the company and the current circumstances of the island, and therefore that's why it's going to be very important that rather than have user agreements that run on for 15 or 20 years, the agreement will be subject to review every 3 years.
And it puts an end to anybody else looking at it. If Stena said, oh, we could just drop a ferry in once a week on the way between UK and Ireland, how do you fancy that? You won't want that, will you? Because you'll be protecting your own business.
Well, we will, one of the aspects of this is that with the £48 million, which I've talked about as the equity holding, we're proposing that we go out and have discussions with other potential investors and or partners. So we will actually be looking, if Tynwald approves the way forward, to talk to potentially any other operators who may have an interest in partnering with us in terms of the operation of the steam packet. And if that's not the case, then we will certainly be looking at investors.
Are you buying a name as such? Will the Isle of Man Steam Packet Company Limited continue?
I sincerely hope and trust that it does. The Isle of Man Steam Packet Company is very much part of the fabric and heritage of this island. There is only room for one sea services operator to operate effectively and efficiently, and I'm very conscious and very mindful that I think the history of the company dictates that the name should remain, and the Isle of Man Steam Packet Company set sail, if I may say so, with a bright future, with a very stable ownership structure.
You want to keep Robert Quayle on, I see, for 6 months at least, as chairman. Yes, is that for continuity?
We are going to make limited changes on transition to ensure that we have a smooth transition, and that the company, which is well run and well operated, and all the due diligence came back, told us that, to ensure that we have a smooth transition. And in 6 months' time, we will take a look at who should be on the board and who shouldn't be on the board. The only change that we'll be making is that we will and are proposing to put in 2 new non-executive directors who will effectively help manage the government's interest for the short term.
Will the passengers see a reduction in prices? I suppose that's probably the bottom line for everyone that's watching this now, is going, because obviously there's deals on, but if you get the wrong weekend or you book late, it's quite expensive, isn't it? And people do complain about that. Will you be hoping to make it a fairer structure?
Ultimately, yes, but let's be clear. The reason why we want this at arm's length, so that it doesn't become basically a free-for-all, and what will invariably happen if, dare I say it, it becomes effectively a Tynwald operated body, is that first and foremost we can expect to see huge amounts of time wasted on the floor of Tynwald discussing minor issues. But the risk is, Paul, if it becomes a political tool, that within a matter of years, effectively, we find that the company is run into the ground because politicians are promising fare cuts, which are simply unsustainable. Now, that's why we think it's absolutely vital that it remains as far away from government as possible, and is restructured in such a way so that the directors have as much responsibility as possible to ensure that a company is run in an effective and efficient
So it could go the other way.
manner.
Prices might have to go up to pay for all this, and to pay for Liverpool Dock, to pay for work done here in Douglas.
Well, there's always unforeseen elements in terms of what's going to happen in the next 10 years. We can only
so you're not guaranteeing anything?
We can absolutely plan to ensure that I think that prices and pricing in the Isle of Man Steam Packet Company will be changed from the RPI structure that they are at the moment in the user agreement, probably to a CPI structure, which, as you know, generally is much lower. And we will be working with the steam packet to ensure that they have put in place the right structures to run the company profitably and make sure that the business is able to cope with, for example, breakdowns, and the business, for example, is able to cope with the new ships that have been promised and other unforeseen circumstances.
Finally, do you feel it's going to be a plain sailing, a smooth sailing? I think through Tynwald. I mean, are you expecting good support?
That will be for Tynwald members. What I can tell you is the Council of Ministers are firmly behind this, and I think it is the right move to make now in the circumstances, and that if it can be refinanced in the way that we've proposed, this will be the money will be back into Treasury coffers in the next 12 months, and in fact, for a fairly minimal outlay in the end, at least this is the plan, we will have effectively bought control, strategic control to the Isle of Man Steam Packet Company, which should secure a much better future both for the business and for the island.